When we talk about African music going global, one name always come up, and that name is Fela Anikulapo Kuti. They said he took Afrobeats to the world. They said he changed everything, and they are not wrong. But what if I told you that before Afrobeats had a name, before African drums shook the Western arenas, before record labels believed Africa could sell, there was a band the world has almost forgotten. A band that infused highlife, rock, jazz, and African rhythm when the industry said African music had no market. A band that signed a worldwide deal when racism was still loud. A band that topped the charts, sold millions, headlined global tours, and forced the West to dance to African drums. Their name was Osibisa. And the movement began with one man, and that man was Francis Osei, later known as Teddy Osei. But here is a question. Why is their name not mentioned first? Why did the pioneers fade while the next generation became legend? This is a story of the revolution that started before the revolution. In this documentary, I'm going to unveil the rise, the fall, and the legacy of Osibisa. Brace yourself. My name is princeteepzy, and this is Fame and Fallout. To truly understand the story behind the rise of Osibisa, their fall, and their legacy, let's go back to the very beginning.
Teddy Osei.
Before Osibisa became a global band, before African drums entered Western radio, before the world danced to African rhythm, everything started with one man. His name was Teddy Osei. He was born Francis Osei in December 17, 1935 in a country called Gold Coast, a British colony, even before Ghana existed. Today, that place is Ghana, and Teddy was born in Kumasi.
The whole story started in Kumasi. That's where I was born.
He was the second child of 7 children, born into a Roman Catholic home. He lived a simple life with strict discipline. They didn't really have money, but music was present in their family.
My parents were Roman Catholics, so they put me with all my brothers and sisters to Roman Catholic teachings.
His father played horn in the church band, and that is where sound began. Not in a studio, not on stage, but in the church. In Ghana, music was not just for entertainment. It was for celebration, funerals, festivals, storytelling, and community. Music was life. As a child, Teddy listened more than he spoke. He attended a Catholic mission school where he was always scared of the teachers. Later in life, he said something powerful. He said he feared those teachers more than anyone else. But that street life built discipline in him. He became an altar boy. He became a strong athlete, focused, serious, determined. Then something important happened. A school teacher introduced the students to traditional instruments, African drums, bells, and bass drum. Teddy started playing the drum in the school band, and he loved the rhythm. He loved how drums could control a crowd. Sometimes he also visited the Ashanti Palace. There, he listened to traditional musicians play folk songs. Without knowing it, these two worlds were entering him. From church to Western horn music, from tradition to African rhythm, both sounds live inside of him. As he grew older, he moved to Sekondi to study draftsmanship. That city was different. It was more modern. It was more commercial, and more importantly, it had more music. It was there he tried to form a band with his friends. At that time, nobody wanted to play the saxophone, so he picked it up. Not because he planned to, but because nobody else was showing interest. So he taught himself how to play the saxophone by listening to jazz records, practicing it alone, and playing it over and over again until he got it right. That saxophone became his voice. Through it, he could speak. Through it, he could dream. After school, he returned to Kumasi and worked as a building inspector. It was a good job with a stable income. People respected him. He could have stayed. He could have lived a safe life, but something kept disturbing him. African music was loved in Africa, but ignored by the world. Western music ruled the radio, rock, jazz, pop, and many foreign sounds. African sound was called local, and Teddy was not comfortable with this reality. He believed African music was powerful enough to travel, but how would the world hear it if no African musician was there? That question refused to leave him night after night. Finally, in 1962, he made a decision. He would leave Ghana. He would go to London, not because life was terrible in Ghana, but because his dream was bigger. Many people warned him. They told him things like, London is hard, you will suffer, you are wasting your time. But Teddy believed something simple. If we stay here, the world will not hear us. So he packed his bags. He left behind his job, his comfort, his country. He did not have a record label. He did not have a global plan, but he had a vision. A vision to mix African rhythm, Western instruments, and modern sound. A band that would not hide its identity. A band that would make the world dance to African drums. He had no idea what would befall him in London. He did not know the struggle ahead, but the journey had just begun.
Teddy boy enjoy.
In 1962, Teddy Osei arrived in London. He did not arrive as a tourist. He did not arrive as a star. He arrived as a young African man with a dream. London was cold, very cold. The weather, the people, the atmosphere, everything felt different. He had left Kumasi with big hopes, but London did not welcome him with open arms. At first, it was hard. He stayed with friends, worked small jobs. At one point, he worked as a dishwasher, looking for every possible way to survive. He needed to work every day to survive because London was expensive and money finished quickly. And being African in the late 1960s was not easy. There was racism, there was rejection, there were doors that did not open. But Teddy did not come to complain. He came to grow. Soon, something important happened. He applied for a grant from the Ghanaian government and he got it. That grant allowed him to study at a private music and drama school in London for 3 years. This was serious. He was not just dreaming anymore. He was training, learning music properly, understanding structure, understanding agreement, understanding performance. He was building himself. London exposed him to new sounds like jazz, soul, rock, and he listened carefully. He studied. He compared those sounds with African rhythm in his mind. He began to see the future clearly. But just when things were becoming stable, something terrible happened. Before we continue, my name is Prince Theophilus. I'm a career coach and a music business consultant. I help talent get to stardom and guide them so that they can avoid serious career mistakes. So if you're an artist, record label executive, or you are starting a business and you need guidance and mentorship, send me a DM with private session or click the link in the description to book a session with me. In this session, I will guide you so you can avoid serious career mistakes. Now, let's get back to the story. In 1966, Ghana's President Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown in a coup and the government changed. And when the government changed, it affected Teddy because he could not get funding anymore and Teddy's grant was cancelled. Just like that, without warning, no backup plan, he was stranded in a foreign country. With no more financial support, many people would have returned home. Many would have given up, but Teddy stayed. He teamed up with other African and Caribbean musicians who were also struggling. They formed a group. They played soul music. They traveled across parts of Europe, especially Switzerland and other small venues. They called themselves Cat's Paw. It was not Osibisa yet, but something was building. Through those struggles, Teddy learned something powerful. To survive in the West, African music must be strong. It must be bold. It must be different. London was not going to hand him success. He would have to create it himself. And soon, you will meet two men who believe in the same idea. Their names were Soul Amafio and Mark Tonto. From there, the foundation of something new was forming. He left Ghana to chase a dream. London tried to break him. History tried to stop him, but the vision was still alive. And in 1969, something magical happened.
Teddy
By the late 1960s, Teddy Osei was still in London. No government support, no steady income, no clear future, but he was no longer alone. Around him were other African musicians who had also been affected by political changes back home. Some had lost funding, some had lost opportunity. All of them were trying to survive. Instead of giving up, that was when they came together and created the band Cat's Paw. The band helped them survive. It gave them experience. It gave them confidence on stage. But deep inside, Teddy knew something. This was not the final vision. Playing soul music was survival. It was not identity. He kept asking himself, why are we copying the West when we already have our own powerful sound? It was around that time he reconnected with two important people, Soul Amafio and Mark Tonto, his brother. They had history together. They had played music before. They understood each other and they shared the same frustration. African musicians were talented, but they were always adjusting to Western tastes. Teddy wanted something different. He wanted African rhythm at the front, not hidden, not reduced. He wanted drums to lead. He wanted horns to scream. He wanted joy. He wanted energy. He wanted something that would make people move without explanation. In 1969, that decision was made. No more copying, no more hiding. They built their band based on African identity, but not traditional music only. It would mix highlife, palm wine music, jazz, rock, soul, African drums. It will sound modern, it will sound international, but it will still sound African. This was the beginning of fusion in music. They gathered musicians in London who were open-minded. Some were Africans, some were Caribbeans. All of them understood rhythm. They did not have a manager. They did not have a record label. They did not even have proper equipment, but they had belief. Then they chose a name called Osibisa. The name came from Osibisaba, a word connected to traditional style of music from Ghana's coastal region. It represented fusion. It represented movement. It represented crossing rhythms. And that was how Osibisa was born.
Give this chance for peace. We should, 'cause all we need.
At first, nobody noticed. They played in small clubs, psychedelic venues in London. Sometimes they were not paid. Sometimes they had to bring their own sound system. Sometimes agents told them, with this kind of music, it would be hard to succeed. But when Osibisa played live, something happened. The audience reacted. People danced. People stared. People felt something different. This was not just music, it was energy. It was Africa speaking loudly. Slowly, word began to spread. There is a band in London. They sound different. They look different. They feel different. Osibisa was no longer just an idea. it was becoming a force. And very soon, the right people would walk into one of their shows and everything would change. In 1969, Osibisa, they were leading. The horns were bold. The rhythm was fast. It was not clean like pop music. It was not smooth like jazz. It was raw. But when they performed live, something happened. Even people who did not understand African music felt the energy. But the energy alone does not give you a contract. They needed management. They needed someone who understood business. For a long time, nobody serious came forward. Some people said the music was too African. Some said it was too risky. Some said there was no market for it. Then one night, everything shifted. They were playing at a club in North London. It was just another show. But in the audience, we had two people who were paying close attention. Gary and Lilia Brown. They ran a bronze music management. They were not just watching the band, they were watching the crowd. They saw how people reacted. They saw the excitement. They saw the difference. After the show, they made a decision that they would manage Osibisa.
We were playing at a nightclub in North London. Lofty Lasisiamo, he's been doing sessions for a management company, and he asked the management, which is a husband and a wife called the Browns, to come and see. And when they came in, they see how the audience is enjoying all the atmosphere. The next day they said, okay, we'll manage you.
That was the first real breakthrough. With proper management, doors began to open. They recorded a demo. They kept performing. They improved their stage presence, and something even bigger happened. An executive from MCA Records came to watch them perform live in London. He did not come for African music. He came because he heard something unusual was happening. So he watched, he listened, he saw the crowd's reaction, and he understood one thing: this band was not local, it was international. Instead of offering them a small UK deal, he signed them to a worldwide multi-album contract, and that changed everything. Osibisa was no longer struggling in small club. They were now signed to a major international label. Even global artists were noticing them. One early supporter was Stevie Wonder, who believed in their sound and encouraged the deal. Suddenly, the same music that agents called too African became valuable. Osibisa entered the studio. They worked with a producer called Tony Visconti. They recorded their first album, and when the music was released, the world reacted. The struggle years were not over, but the door had opened, and once that door opened, African music stepped in. Once the deal was signed, everything moved fast. Osibisa was no longer just a London club band. They were now an international act. The studio sessions began. The sound became bigger, cleaner, stronger, but they did not remove the African drums from their sound. They did not reduce the rhythm. They did not hide their identity. They made it louder. In 1971, Osibisa released their first studio album. They did not give it a complicated name. They called it Osibisa. Simple, confident, like they were announcing themselves to the world. This is who we are. That debut album introduced their Afro-rock fusion sound to the world. The album had songs like Music for the Gong Gong, Aiko Bia, Oranges, and Fallacy. It did not sound like anything else on the British radio. It was not rock. It was not pure jazz. It was not traditional African music. It was a mix of highlife, soul, rock, African percussion, strong horns, and that was the birth of Afro-rock. The album cover stood out. It had bright colors, bold artwork, and the famous flying elephant. You could not ignore it in record stores. Radio stations in UK started playing their music. Then Europe followed, then other parts of the world. For the first time, an African-led band was entering Western charts without hiding their roots. Osibisa began touring heavily. United Kingdom, Germany, France, India, Japan, Australia, New Zealand. They were not opening for others, they were headlining shows. Crowd came to see them, and when they performed live, it felt like celebration. Drums pounding, horns shouting, people dancing. Even those who did not understand the language understood the rhythm. In the same 1971, they released their second album titled Woyaya. That album made them stronger internationally. The main song in the album were Woyaya,
We are going, heaven knows where we are going.
Beautiful Seven, White Sharp, and many more. Woyaya became one of their most famous songs. It later became popular again in America when Art Garfunkel covered it. The album helped them enter deeper into the UK and US market. It strengthened their touring demand. It proved that they were not one album band. Then in 1972, they released their third studio album titled Heads. This album showed maturity. It has songs like The Warrior, Inspiration, and I'm Going Home. This album solidified their UK audience, increased European popularity, and strengthened their live reputation. In 1973, they released Superfly TNT. It was a soundtrack project which expanded their international exposure and showed they could adapt to film sound. In the same year, they released Happy Children. It was more energetic, more experimental.
Happy little children, no time to play, work and learn.
Then in 1964, they released Osibisa Rock. This album leaned more into their rock influence. The reception was decent, but the market was slowly changing.
Who's got the paper? Who's got the match? Who's got the paper? Who's got the match?
In 1975, they released Welcome Home. It became one of their strongest mid-70s work. Then, in 1976, they released Oja Awake. This album marked the end of their true peak period. After this album, their global dominance began slowing down. The band even played at major historic events, including 1980 Zimbabwe Independence Celebration. That moment was powerful. A man born in colonial Gold Coast, now performing at the celebration of African independence, full cycle. By the mid-1970s, Osibisa had achieved something many thought was impossible. They make African rhythm global, not as background sound, not as decoration, but as a main attraction. But success brings new challenges, and this is where their story turns dark.
Teddy Osei.
By the late 1970s, the music world had shifted. Disco exploded, punk arrived, new wave took over. The radio stations wanted something new. Osibisa was still powerful, but they were no longer new. And that is the hard truth of music. The pioneers introduced it, and the next generation commercialized it. Osibisa continued releasing music. They continued touring. They were still loved in India and other parts of Europe, but the global spotlight was fading. The same word that once called them revolutionary now called them classic. And sometimes, classic is a polite word for past.
Teddy Osei.
Time does not spare musicians. One by one, the original era began to close. Mark Tonto, the powerful trumpeter, the key founding member of the band, passed away in the year 2000. He was one of the pillars of the original sound. Years later, the leader himself, Teddy Osei, the man who carried the vision, the man that was born in colonial Gold Coast. He passed away on 14th of January 2025. He was 89 years old. He left behind 3 daughters, Agnes, Matilda, and Shanta. But he also left behind something much larger, a foundation. He was born before Ghana became independent. He died after African music conquered the world. This was not a small journey. Soul Amafios survived longer. Other members retired quietly. Some faded from public life. The original golden lineup slowly became history. But Osibisa as a name did not die completely. New music kept the band alive. They performed, they recorded, but it was no longer the same fire. Osibisa did not die in one dramatic moment. There was no scandal, no explosive breakup, no public collapse. They faded slowly, quietly, like many pioneers do. But here is a deeper truth. Without Osibisa, African music would have taken longer to break Western walls. They proved African rhythm could headline global stages. They proved identity could sell. They worked so later generations could run. When Afrobeat fills stadium today, most of the fans do not remember the name Osibisa, but history does, and history remembers. From 1971 to 1976, they shook the world. From Gold Coast to global charts. That is not small story. That is legacy. So when next you hear the name Fela Kuti, Burna Boy, Wizkid, Davido, and many other African artists selling out stadiums today, remember the name Osibisa. They paved the way. If you like stories like this, you might also like to watch the story of Miriam Makeba. Click here right now to watch it, or click here to watch more fame and fallout stories.